Hello lovely people, and welcome back to this week's new video. Today I will officially be wrapping up my 2024 reading year by talking about my top books of 2024. For last year I have 7 books and a couple honorable mentions as well, so let's just get right into it. If you're new here, hi, my name is Noah. I'm a bookish and lifestyle vlogger born and raised and still based in New York City, so if that sounds like of any interest to you, I hope that you keep on watching and subscribe at the end if you so please, and I would absolutely love for you to join my little journey here. First one's kind of easy because it was my first read of the year. It was so much fun. 5 stars all across the board, really fun. It was the type where I closed the book on the subway and had to just start reading it again from the beginning because I was just so intrigued, and I would absolutely love to do a reread of this to see if I can figure everything out and keep up. And that book is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This was a really popular mystery in 2023, which is why I chose it as my book of the month pick, but never got around to it. I think it won the Goodreads Choice Awards for its category, and it felt too perfect, so I chose it as my first book of the year, and like I said, it was so amazing. In this book we're following 2 women. They are both celebrating their birthday in a local pub and lead very different lives. Alex is a popular podcaster, and Josie on the other hand leads a really different, dark, sadder life, and Alex finds it a little bit unsettling. They both meet, and Josie asks Alex to do a podcast surrounding the events of her life, and discovers that she might not actually know who Josie is, and that there's just a lot of strange unanswered questions. Eventually, Alex becomes the subject of her own true crime podcast, and I really love books in podcast form. Actually, I discovered you never really know what to believe because none of this is true. Had so much fun with this. The next book I gave 5 stars to was The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjan Kamali. This is Marjan Kamali's second book, and she is easily becoming one of my top authors, someone I would love to have as an auto-buy. She is a historical fiction author, and there's something so beautiful about it, and the relationships between the characters that she writes is just so real and very powerful. Her first book that I read last year, or 2 years ago I guess, The Stationery Shop, was amazing, gorgeous. I sobbed at work finishing it, and it was just so amazing that I knew that as soon as I saw that she was going to have a new book, I had to read it. So I chose this for my June 2024 book of the month. You'll see that it's kind of a pattern. It was just so gorgeous. Stationery Shop was surrounding more romantic, but this one was platonic love, best friends. This is taking place in a 1950s Tehran, and Ellie and Homa are best friends. Ellie grew up very wealthy, but something happens where she has to downgrade a lot of her life. It's just her and her mom. And Homa, she is one of the girls that lives in the new neighborhood that Ellie moves to. They become best friends at school, and it follows the decades of their lives and how their lives are intertwined, the impact that they had on each other, and how they may come to find each other at the end. Their happiness does get disrupted when Ellie's family has the opportunity to move back up into the ranks of wealth, and Homa is kind of just left. Ellie wants to rebrand herself, and she is leading this life of glamour, while Homa wants to stay true to herself and fight and change the politics of the world that they currently live in. Like I said, the relationships that Marjan Kamali writes is just so amazing, and the bond between Ellie and Homa was just so strong, and it just made me want to continue reading about the two of them. It was also just really interesting reading about women during this age in Tehran. It begins in the 1950s, but I think it ended towards 2022. It was also very politically relevant as well. She just writes very strong female characters, and I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to see what else she comes out with. The next book that I have is one that I didn't even know was going to be a sequel, but it is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. This is the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea. Koda, my fiance, bought this for me. We just happened to be at Kinokuniya, the Japanese bookstore, and it was there. I saw that it had sprayed edges, and I was automatically eyeing it, obviously. I knew that this was coming out, I think, but I didn't know that, like I said, it was a sequel. I really loved The House in the Cerulean Sea when I read it a couple years ago. I did it as a buddy read with a friend, and it was just so heartwarming and cozy, and just all the vibes, the perfect fall vibes that I wanted. And when I read this, honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better sequel. I would have given this 6 stars if I could. It just took me right back into the world. I absolutely love all of the children. So I'll just tell you what The House in the Cerulean Sea is about. about. There is Arthur. He runs an orphanage for magical children. And then there is Linus. He is like a caseworker who comes to evaluate Arthur and whether or not he is a good fit, if the children are a good fit. Arthur is also a magical being, and Linus is just a regular old human with lots of prejudices against magical beings, as he does not understand them or interact with them, and finds that Arthur really changes his view. And all of the children involved, I think there are like 6 children, are so funny. They have all of these different gorgeous personalities and abilities. It was just a really cozy fantasy, the best kind of cozy fantasy. So in this one, this is the sequel. Arthur is being summoned by the government to make a personal statement on his past to see whether he is fit to be taking care of these magical beings. And then there's a whole other debate about whether or not magical beings should be granted any sort of rights. Also very relevant in today as well, especially with TJ Klune being a queer author. It was very, very powerful read, and I just want to give everyone a hug in this. Truly, truly a special, special read. I cannot recommend this anymore. It was just so touching and delightful and funny, and I cannot recommend this book enough. The next one I have is one that I read during a, I think, 24-hour readathon that I did on my own, and it is Shark Heart, A Love Story by Emily Haybeck. This also kind of took the reading world by storm in 2023. This was a Book of the Year finalist for Book of the Month that I originally kind of looked over because the premise seemed a little weird. However, Gabby Reads here read this. I watched a vlog of hers. She was crying. I just figured that it was worth reading. So many people loved it apparently, so I would give it a try. Got it. Took me a while to read it in 2024, but it was truly special. I read this 400-page book in like 2 hours, not even. It is a little bit easier because the chapters are very short prose. I am not someone who really annotates very much or defaces my books. However, I cried so much I decided to dog-ear the parts where I did, and this is definitely something that I think that I would love to revisit. You can't really tell that I dog-eared it when you look at it like that, but I think this is something that I would love to tab and highlight, and that's how I know that I love a book so much, because I want to deface it. It was truly so special, and such a unique concept as well. So at its heart, this book is a love story. There's Lewis and Ren, and in this world that they live in, there is a specific strain of illness that causes humans to morph into animals. There's different animals that you can become, but in Lewis and Ren's life, Lewis becomes a shark. So they have a lot of struggles surrounding that. They are a newlywed couple, and Lewis slowly is starting to deteriorate, have shark-like tendencies. They know that eventually he will have to be released into the wild. When he is, he will still have his mind, but slowly kind of disappear, and it's just sort of the course of their lives of dealing with something like this as a couple. And it's so just a really strange concept. However, it's just truly a romance, a love story at heart, and seeing the bond between these two people who just fell in love, and the amount of care that goes into like needing to take care of your partner and going through that struggle together was so, so beautiful. Like, I really didn't think that I would sob this much about a man becoming a shark. But it was also because of the prose of it, it was so readable, and because I was reading this during a 24-hour readathon, I was probably up at like 3 a.m. just silently sobbing to myself. I can link the vlog of this, but it was just so, so special. I thought it was really beautifully written, especially for a debut that I was really shocked by. So Emily Haybeck is definitely an author that I will be keeping an eye out for. The next book that I have is also a book that I read during this 24-hour readathon. Because I was reading it during then, I also got through this very, very quickly. I think I gave this like 4.5 stars. It's Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Kavanaugh. I'd never read from this author before. I've heard of him. I know that he is like a semi-popular author within the mystery thriller genre. But again, Book of the Month pick. I picked pretty good ones. This one was from March. This is really just pretty self-explanatory. Two people come up with a plan, say, hey, I will kill that person for you if you kill this person in my life. For me, bing, bang, boom, nobody will be the wiser. Done deal, right? So it's supposed to be a very like Hitchcockian style story. You're really just trying to keep up with what's going on. You're following Amanda and Wendy in New York City. They are strangers that happen to meet by chance. They're lonely. They want to have revenge and seek justice for the man who destroyed their lives, their families. It was just really, really fun to read this. It was a good sign, especially during a 24-hour readathon, that I just didn't want to stop reading. It kept me very engaged. It was just a really, really overall fun time, and I just needed to know what was going to happen. I think I ended up not giving it the full 5 stars because of like small parts of the ending that bothered me. However, for the most part, in the bigger picture, it was really wonderful, and upon a reread, it could be a 5-star read, but I will definitely be reading more from this author. I just think the concept of this was like, obviously we've seen before, but something about it to me was just really different, and I had a really enjoyable time with this. The 7th and last book is a book that I read very early on in the year. I actually took it with me on vacation. Really great way to start out the year, honestly, on vacation. This is a very popular read. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Everyone was reading this in 2023, and I didn't want to fall into the hype. I'm not really a big romantasy reader either, so I didn't want to fall into the hype, but everybody was talking about it. One of my closest friends was also really raving about it, so I decided that I would read it. I had like a Barnes & Noble gift card, so I figured I would pick up this gorgeous special edition. It has bonus chapters in Xaden's point of view also. I was very pleasantly surprised. I gave this 5 stars, I believe, or 4.5 if not. It was just also a really great time. I think it was like really great that I picked this up with pretty low expectations because I was really pleasantly surprised, and I had a lot of fun with this. I even bought a Fourth Wing crew neck on Etsy that I love. It's really comfortable, and I have Onyx Storm pre-ordered, so I can't wait for that to come later this month. Maybe also because I wasn't reading a lot of romantasy to begin with, or fantasy at all really, that I just had a lot of fun with this. Like, what's the word in English? Like, because I hadn't read it in a while, that it was just that much easier to jump into and be swept away by. I did read Iron Flame a couple months later and didn't love it as much. It just felt like an obvious filler book, but I am really excited to see where Onyx Storm goes. And yeah, I am part of that Fourth Wing hype. I have 5 books on my honorary mention list. I only own one of them, but I thought I would just quickly go through them. First one is another book that I read early on in the year, had a really strong start to the year, and that's Bright Young Women by Jessica Joyce. I haven't read her other stuff, but I thought this was really relevant and important to talk about in terms of the perspective of women and the survivors of what happened to them. So it was really powerful and necessary for stories to be told in this perspective. This is inspired by real life events of a real life serial killer and the women whose lives were affected, destroyed by this one celebrity killer. The important perspective, I thought, was not mentioning the killer's name or anything to identify him at all, because then it would take away completely from the women and the horrific things that were done to them. So this is taking place in 1978, and a serial killer has escaped prison, and a sorority in Florida has been targeted by this serial killer. We're following sorority president Pamela, who was a survivor, and Tina's best friend Ruth was murdered 4 years ago, and she believes that this serial killer is the same one that murdered her best friend, and together they're figuring out what happened and why. The rest are novellas, actually, that honestly just mentioning mostly because of how much I enjoyed them. Novellas I kind of have a hard time with because they're so short, and I feel like I want them to pack more of a punch. I just want them to be more of a story behind them. So that's Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. It was a really great fantasy. You want there to be so much more world building in a fantasy, but I think Untethered Sky did a really wonderful job where it made me want to keep reading. Megan by Rebecca Witherspoon was wonderful because I was in a reading slump and discovered that a little BDSM smutty romance was exactly what I needed to get back into reading and wanting to read. I consumed this by ebook and fell into the whole Rebecca Witherspoon like backlist of these characters and read a whole bunch of the other ones, scoured the internet to find them when my library didn't, and I just had so much fun with it. House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman was a really interesting one. I think if I read it in one sitting, I would have probably enjoyed it more, but I had so much fun with it, and I am still like new-ish to horror, so this was like a really fun one as well. And so was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. I think this is like a more like fucked up type of horror that was just so horrifying that I should have given it 5 stars, but like couldn't fathom the idea of doing it because I was so afraid and it was so sickening. Those are ones that I needed to mention. I am so looking forward to my 2025 reads. I'm still in the middle of my first book of the year, which kind of sucks. I just need to like dedicate more time to reading, but I hope that you are having a good reading year so far. Let me know if some of our 2024 favorites overlapped and what yours are down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!